This is the story of Olympia Beer, the Pacific Northwest brewery that built an empire on artesian water, survived Prohibition, conquered Hollywood, and then vanished almost overnight, leaving behind only echoes of "It's the Water" and a crumbling monument to American brewing history. Picture this scene from 1895 in Tumwater, Washington. A German immigrant named Leopold Friederich Schmidt stands beside the rushing waters of the Deschutes River, watching the tumbling falls cascade over ancient rocks. He's traveled from the gold fields of Montana, walked 150 miles on foot through wilderness, and helped build entire towns from nothing but canvas and dreams. But here, beside these falls, he sees something different, something that would change the course of American brewing forever. Leopold wasn't just any immigrant with big dreams. By the time he reached Tumwater, he'd already served in the Montana Constitutional Convention, been elected to represent his district in the state legislature, and learned the brewing business almost by accident when a brewery owner asked him to mind the shop while traveling to Europe. Schmidt discovered he had a talent for turning grain and water into liquid gold. When Leopold and his brother Louis purchased the old Biles and Carter Tannery on September 17, 1895, they weren't just buying property. They were acquiring rights to something precious, the lower Tumwater Falls and access to artesian springs that had been flowing pure and cold for thousands of years. The Statkazabsh people, ancestors of the Nisqually, Squaxin Island, and Chehalis tribes, had known the power of this water for centuries. Now, Schmidt would harness it for something entirely new. After sending samples to the Wallhenius Institute for testing, Schmidt made a declaration that would echo through brewing history. "With this water, I believe I can brew better beer than ever." And in October 1896, he did exactly that, establishing the Capital Brewing Company with $125,000 in capital stock and beginning production of what would become Olympia Beer. The water wasn't just marketing fluff. Artesian springs occur when underground water, trapped between impermeable rock layers, finds a natural outlet and flows to the surface under its own pressure. The water at Tumwater had been filtered through layers of rock for decades, emerging pure, mineral-rich, and consistently cold, perfect for brewing. Schmidt knew he'd found something special. By 1902, the company had grown enough to merit a name change to Olympia Brewing Company. That same year, Company Secretary Frank Kenny approached Leopold with an idea that would become one of America's most enduring advertising slogans. "You know that whenever anyone asks why Olympia Beer is better than other beers, we always say that it is on account of the water we use in brewing," Kenny said. "So why not use for our slogan, 'It's the Water'?" Those three simple words would carry Olympia Beer across the country and through decades of changing tastes and fierce competition. The slogan wasn't just clever marketing, it was truth in advertising, back when that still meant something. The brewery grew rapidly. A magnificent brick brewhouse designed by architect Joseph Volib was completed in 1906, its Mission Revival architecture making it a landmark visible for miles. By 1909, Olympia Brewing had become Tumwater's principal industry, employing over 100 people with an annual payroll of $100,000, serious money in those days. Production peaked at 100,000 barrels in 1914. The same year, Leopold Schmidt passed away, leaving his brewing empire to his eldest son, Peter. But success in those days came with a ticking clock. The temperance movement was gaining steam across America, and Washington state would prove to be ahead of the curve, implementing Prohibition in 1916, 4 full years before the rest of the nation followed suit. The Schmidt family saw it coming and made the painful decision to cease brewing operations in 1915, spending their final year selling off existing inventory while the political winds shifted against them. Prohibition could have been the end of the story. Many breweries simply shuttered their doors and never reopened. But the Schmidts were survivors. They pivoted with remarkable agility, producing a near beer called German Brew, a malt extract marketed for home brewing, and even a sparkling apple drink called Apple Jew with the slogan, "Drink an apple." They diversified into other businesses, building what would become the foundation of the modern Westin Hotels chain, and starting transport operations that eventually merged with Greyhound bus lines. When Prohibition finally ended in 1933, the Schmidt family was ready. They built a new, larger brewery uphill from the original site in 1934 and resumed production of real Olympia beer. The brand hadn't just survived, it came back stronger. By 1940, they'd surpassed their pre-Prohibition production levels and were looking toward national expansion. The post-war boom years were golden for Olympia. In 1950, they became one of the first breweries to sell beer in cans. Peter Schmidt introduced the innovative stubby bottle, shorter than traditional bottles, but holding the same amount of beer, stackable, portable, and requiring no return bottle deposit. These innovations helped Olympia compete with larger national brands while maintaining their regional identity. The 1960s and 70s saw Olympia reach its true peak. The beer that started beside a waterfall in Tumwater was now available coast to coast. Hollywood embraced the brand. Dustin Hoffman's character drank Olympia in The Graduate. Paul Newman sipped it in Sometimes a Great Notion. And Clint Eastwood made it his beer of choice in film after film, from Magnum Force to Every Which Way But Loose. Even his orangutan co-star Clyde got in on the action. Daredevil Evel Knievel wore Olympia patches on his jackets and stitched the brand name onto his parachutes. The company paid premium prices for these endorsements, understanding that national expansion required national visibility. The strategy worked. Olympia beer became synonymous with the rugged, independent spirit of the American West. But behind the success, storm clouds were gathering. The ban on tobacco advertising in 1971 had unexpected consequences for the beer industry. Tobacco giant Philip Morris, suddenly flush with advertising dollars and nowhere to spend them, had purchased Miller Brewing in 1969. Armed with virtually unlimited marketing budgets, companies like Miller began waging advertising warfare that smaller regional breweries simply couldn't match. Olympia tried to adapt. They acquired Ham's Brewery in 1974 and Lone Star in 1977, attempting to build a portfolio that could compete with the new mega brewers. They experimented with marketing campaigns like the mysterious artesians, mythical beings who supposedly controlled the artesian water supply. But these efforts felt forced compared to the simple honesty of, "It's the water." The numbers tell the story of decline with stark clarity. Sales that had peaked at over 1 million barrels per year in the late 1970s began a steady slide. Competition wasn't just coming from other beer companies. The entire American drinking landscape was changing. Wine consumption was rising, cocktails were becoming more sophisticated, and a new generation of consumers was discovering imports and, eventually, craft beer. By 1982, the Schmidt family had seen enough. After nearly 9 decades of brewing, they decided to sell to G. Heilemann Brewing Company the following year. That marked the end of an era, but not yet the end of Olympia Beer. Heilemann continued production, understanding the value of the brand and its loyal following. But corporate ownership brought corporate priorities. When Stroh Brewery Company purchased G. Heilemann in 1996, Olympia became just another brand in a portfolio managed by accountants rather than brewers. 3 years later, Pabst Brewing Company acquired the brand, and the writing was on the wall. The final blow came not from changing tastes or corporate reshuffling, but from cold economic reality. When SAB Miller took control of the Tumwater facility in 2002, they found themselves operating a small brewery in an industry increasingly dominated by massive automated production facilities. On June 20, 2003, SAB Miller announced the closure of the Tumwater Brewery, citing the unprofitability of such a small operation. 600 jobs vanished overnight. Environmental disasters have compounded the tragedy. In February 2019, vandals damaged a transformer, spilling 587 gallons of PCB-contaminated oil into the Deschutes River. The cleanup cost $11.37 million, though the responsible party eventually settled for $2.3 million. The same water that once made Olympia Beer famous was now being poisoned by the ruins of its own brewery. Multiple attempts at redevelopment have failed. Real estate deals have collapsed, developers have walked away, and the property remains a painful reminder of industrial decline. The city of Tumwater has received grants from the EPA and Washington State Department of Ecology to assess environmental contamination, but the scale of cleanup needed is staggering. Yet somehow, impossibly, Olympia Beer survives. Pobst continued brewing the brand at various facilities until 2021, when they announced a temporary pause in production. But the story didn't end there. Great Western Brewing in Saskatoon, Saskatchewan now produces Olympia Beer for the Canadian market. The cans still feature the iconic waterfall imagery, though the beer is now made hundreds of miles from its birthplace. More intriguingly, small craft breweries have begun paying homage to the Olympia legacy. Künstler Brewing in San Antonio introduced Olympia Revival in 2024, brewing in collaboration with the original Olympia Brewing Company. Well, 80 Artesian Brewing in Olympia itself works with legendary former Olympia brewmaster Paul Knight to produce Original Lager Year 64, connecting directly to the brewery's golden age. And here's what feels most appropriate. Olympia Distilling Company has returned to Tumwater, producing award-winning Olympia Artesian Vodka using the same pristine water that Leopold Schmidt discovered more than a century ago. They've even crowdfunded expansion, proving that investors still believe in the power of that artesian spring. The artesian wells continue to flow around Tumwater and Olympia. More than 100 remain active, with many open to the public. On any given day, you can see locals lining up to fill bottles and jugs with the same pure water that once made Olympia Beer famous. Standing today among the ruins of the Olympia Brewery, you can still hear the echo of rushing water over the falls. The Deschutes River continues its eternal journey to the sea, carrying with it the memory of what was and the promise of what might be again. Somewhere in the sound of that water is the ghost of Leopold Schmidt's voice, still insisting after all these years that with this water, you can brew better beer than ever. The question isn't whether Olympia Beer will return to its birthplace, it's whether anyone has the vision, resources, and determination to make It's the Water more than just a memory. Until then, the falls keep tumbling, the artesian springs keep flowing, and the spirit of Olympia Beer lives on in every drop.